I'm an attorney in Southern California. I represent bands, artists, independent artists, musicians from various genres and backgrounds in the areas of entertainment law, criminal defense, and generally in dealing with a variety of entities, whether it's record labels, agents, venues, protecting their interests primarily. Whenever a band is about to schedule a tour with a variety of venues, or one particular large venue where they're going to be performing, for example, a rock band or perhaps a DJ, they are going to want to have an attorney really look at the terms specific to that performance or series of performances for a variety of reasons. Number one, of course, to protect themselves in terms of civil liability if something happens to go wrong. Is the venue insured? Who is going to sustain the burden of perhaps a physical injury that might happen in a mosh pit? There's so many things that can go wrong during a performance that could be completely out of your control. If you're in a band, you're on stage, your music happens to foment the passions of certain persons in the audience, and they go wild. And you're going to want to be careful when you're engaged in that type of situation to have an attorney really look at the relationship that you're establishing with that venue to make sure that the burden of any civil liability that arises out of that performance falls on the venue and not yourself, not your bandmates, of course. And then, of course, there are there's a variety of other contracts. Contract with, obviously, with a record label that could be that could really make or break you financially, because if you are tied down into a series of performances or albums or other sorts of releases, and you're not getting your fair cut, if the royalties are not really beneficial to you in terms of a percentage amount, that could do a tremendous amount of harm to your livelihood. You want to make sure you have an attorney who's experienced, seasoned, aggressive, and assertive, and meticulous, looking at every fine point of any agreement that you enter into with a distribution, a record label, to make sure that you're going to receive just compensation for your art. Well, I've represented musicians in a variety of areas, and not just entertainment law, of course. There is the area of criminal defense, which is hugely relevant to bands and musicians performing at any wide variety of venues. If any one of the bandmates participates in some sort of illegal activity, some sort of fraud, you could be looking at a conspiracy situation, and now you have a multitude of persons, basically everybody in the band, perhaps even roadies, who could be pooled in together and incur criminal liability. The hip-hop genre, the rap genre, is really unique among all the other genres when it comes to intellectual property, because it employs so much sampling of previous songs, perhaps a little snippet of somebody's voice. So what happens oftentimes is, I would say most, if not all the times, especially with independent artists, they do not procure express written permission as the law really requires when something is copyrighted. They don't procure that consent of the owner of that intellectual property, of that voice snippet or that part of a melody of a song. And when they do that, they're violating copyright laws, and they're essentially giving the owner of that song or voice sample, they're giving them grounds to sue them for copyright infringement, and the damages with that can be astronomical. So if you're a hip-hop artist, and I grew up with it, continue to be a fan of hip-hop, especially if you're an underground independent artist and you don't have you don't have the backing, of course, of an artist who has he can use or fall back on a legal team of a record label that he's subscribed to. You want to be extremely careful. You either want to come up with your own music. At minimum, you want to have that express written permission. The only way out of it is, of course, if you're in a position that you can pay out royalties if you don't procure that permission, but you're going to be looking at the royalties for something like that can be astronomical. The best thing to do is, before engaging in something like that, you're going to want to consult with an attorney and make sure that it's, maybe it's in the public domain. If it isn't, again, you have to make sure that you have that express written permission. That's something that happens all the time. There's been extensive litigation in this area with regard to hip-hop artists, and that's something that needs to be considered before simply taking or borrowing a music sample from or a melody from another song.